Welcome to PWS United, a podcast for the Prader-Willi syndrome community, brought to you by PWSA USA. This podcast gives the latest news in research, advocacy, and family support by bringing together staff, volunteers, PWS treatment specialists, biotech and pharmaceutical representatives, caregivers, family members, and individuals with PWS. Our goal is to share education, awareness, and resources with those living with PWS and their supporters. Join us in our mission to enhance the quality of life and empower those affected by Prader-Willi syndrome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of PWS United, a podcast for the PWS community. So the 2025 United and Hope International PWS Conference is over. And while we're exhausted and sad that it has ended, our cups are so full from the incredible experience, the knowledge that we gained, the connections that we made, seeing old friends, making new ones, and just being all together. It was an incredible experience. But we'll have a recap coming soon, so I won't say too much more about that. But I am excited to bring you one of the very informative sessions from the conference, which was Nutrition Recommendations for Children and Families with PWS, presented by Michael Tan, registered dietitian from the University of Florida. This session was an overview of traditional nutrition recommendations, say that 3 times fast, current recommendations and guidance, and how everyone in the family can play a role. So Michael is a registered dietitian, a certified diabetes educator in the Division of Pediatric Endocrinology at the University of Florida College of Medicine, and he specializes in Prader-Willi syndrome, pediatric obesity, and both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. In 2005, he earned a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Food Engineering from the University of Florida. After graduating from UF, he gained 9 years of experience in the food industry before deciding to switch careers to focus on nutrition in 2013. In May of 2015, he obtained his Bachelor's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics, I hope I'm saying that right, from the University of North Florida, and then his Master's of Science in Dietetics from the University of Rhode Island in 2016. Michael works closely with Dr. Jennifer Miller, and in his current role has been helping families with PWS since 2018. Michael has been a speaker at past conferences. He spoke at the National PWS Conference in 2023 and also the International PWS Conference in 2022, as well as other PWS statewide conferences. We are so grateful to Michael for the work that he does in the PWS community and for allowing PWS United to record and share his presentation from the conference. A few things to note: that there were slides along with Michael's presentation, and if and when those become available to me, I will make sure to let you all know and get you access. I'm publishing this episode just after 36 hours of getting home from conference, so it doesn't leave Michael a lot of time to get me those slides. But when they are available, if they do become available, then I will make sure you get them. But also note, you don't need the slides. I mean, there were some examples on the slides, but you can certainly follow along and get a lot out of this presentation without the slides. Another thing to note is that there are some questions at the end, but they did not come through clearly enough on the podcast mic, so I've dubbed a brief explanation into the podcast before each one. Of course, I don't have all the details of each question, but I kind of give you the essence of what it's about, so Michael's response makes sense. And then there were a few other questions that I just deleted because they're very personal and detailed to each person. But the ones that I kept in can apply to anyone. So if you attended conference and are interested in sharing a testimonial on the podcast about your conference experience, please reach out to me, Annie, at africky@pwsausa.org, and I'll send you a link to sign up just to do a 5-minute recap of your favorite part about conference and things like that, just to share a little bit of your experience. So I will keep you no longer because Michael Tan has a lot of helpful information to share about nutrition and PWS. So let's get into it.
Good morning, everyone. It's weird not doing this presentation with Dr. Miller. We usually tag team this together. So I do encourage you to go to her presentation. That's tomorrow at 1. I do actually want you to go to that just because she describes a lot of the physiology and rationale for my nutrition recommendations. Anyway, thank you, Melanie. Like she said, my name is Mike. I've been working with the PWS community for 7 years now, and I love this community. I love all of you. I see a lot of familiar faces in here. I see a lot of new faces too. So a lot of people call me Mr. Mike. Some people call me Mr. T. Some people call me Uncle Mike, Father Mike, as if I'm like a food priest or something, but I'm not. Anyway, so my goal here today is just help everyone out from a nutritional point of view. Obviously, I want everybody to be healthy and happy and live as long as possible and be as healthy as possible. So my goal is to help you all from that point of view. Anyway, that's me, and that's some of my friends there. So just a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to discuss like the traditional nutrition recommendations that a lot of people still do, especially in the adult population. And I'll kind of tell you how my recommendations, how our recommendations are different than what kind of was traditionally done in the past. And then, of course, I'll talk about what I believe and what our recommendations are nutritionally. And to me, there's 4 kind of key pillars when it comes to my nutrition recommendations. Number 1 is quality. Of course, we want good, high quality food. There's no question about that. That goes for everybody. Quantity, so portions, serving sizes, how much, how often, etc. Balance. To me, balance is really, really, really important. So even if you're eating the right types of food and the right amounts of food, if you're not balancing your meals, that can have an effect as well. Variety is obviously very important. A lot of our families kind of get stuck in a rut and serve the same foods over and over and over again. I think a lot of that has to do with, as we all know PWS, a lot of our kids are pretty rigid, and introducing variety, introducing new foods or different foods can be challenging. So that's something I like to encourage as much as possible. Drinks is critical, and I'll discuss drinks. Convenience. So the point of me talking about convenience is I want let a lot of families know you don't have to be a 5-star chef. You don't have to be super confident in the kitchen. You don't have to make everything homemade. It is okay to use some convenient foods. And I'll give examples on what I mean by that. But a lot of families, when they hear the diagnosis, they feel a lot of pressure on their shoulders, a lot of weight on their shoulders, and they feel like they have to do everything perfectly, everything from scratch. And I just want to let you know, you do not have to do that unless you enjoy it. Some of our families do enjoy it. Meal scheduling. To me, I kind of wanted to focus on this. A lot of people may have seen me talk in the past, but I'm going to spend a little more time on meal scheduling because I think recently that has been more of a focus for us. Special occasions, what that means nutritionally for our families and for our kids. Family responsibility. So it's not just parents who are involved with this. Grandparents, siblings, teachers, friends. This is a whole social orbit. Everybody is involved here. And then a summary. Okay, so traditional nutrition recommendations. So again, a lot of people still follow this, especially in the adult community. It really focuses on calories. And not that I don't care about calories, but I don't focus on calories. I'm not saying calories aren't important. Of course, they are important. Of course, we have to respect how many calories are in things. However, I want to try to get away from the idea that just because something is lower calorie does not necessarily mean it's bad for you. Or just because something may be a little more calories, that doesn't necessarily mean, I may have said that wrong. Did I say that wrong? Sorry. You guys need to correct me. So just because something is low calorie doesn't mean it's good for you. Just because something is higher calorie doesn't mean it's bad for you. So the disadvantages of focusing purely on calories. So it limits fat. Fat is not the devil. Fat is not evil. Fat is okay. There's definitely advantages and benefits to eating fat. So if you're following a calorie restricted diet, fat is severely restricted. Also, if you're focused on calories, you would allow things like Crystal Light, things like diet soda, things like sugar-free Jello. And in my opinion, these aren't necessarily good for us. These do not offer any nutritional benefit at all. So yes, they have no calories. Yes, they have no sugar, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial to us in any sort of physiological way. But if you're focused on calories, you would allow these. Of course, calorie counting is tedious. It's not fun. It's a lot of work. And it inappropriately associates lower calorie or weight to being healthy or unhealthy. So I kind of want to dissociate that calorie and health or that weight and health relationship. Okay. So the current recommendations, they're not super unique. A lot of people, when they first hear the diagnosis, they think that they need to follow some super special, super specialized, super unique diet, and they do not. You do not have to. But it is more strict. As we all know, it is more strict than the general population. One of the reasons why, is because of the cognitive rigidity, right? We've all seen it. We all know it. A lot of our kids have trouble being flexible. So that's one reason why it is more strict. It's hard to negotiate. It's hard to be flexible. So it is beneficial many times to give more specific guidelines and be much more black and white. It focuses on sustenance rather indulgence. Now, this is extremely hard, especially nowadays. Food is glorified everywhere you look, whether it's commercials or social media or wherever. Food is glorified. Our recommendations try to focus more on just pure purpose of food and not pleasure. I like to tell people function over flavor. Now, I'm not saying you can't enjoy your food, but people need to focus a little bit more on the function of food, right? The purpose of food, not just pleasure, right? Food is not just entertainment and not just for fun. There's also a physiologic purpose to food, and that our focus is on that. Of course, it is completely impossible to completely get away from enjoyment of food or food for special occasions or food for emotional eating, boredom eating. It's impossible to get away from it, but we try to minimize that as best we can. So the recommendations are based on the Mediterranean diet. There's a boatload of research on the benefits of Mediterranean diet. So that's kind of where the origins come from. Again, the 4 key aspects: quality, quantity, balance, and variety. Okay, and I'm going to go through each of these individually. So quality first. So protein, it's pretty obvious. Vegetables, it's obvious. And then complex carbs. This one is a little less obvious. What we mean by complex carbs are any sort of whole grain, like whole grain bread, whole grain English muffin, brown rice, any sort of starchy vegetable, or any sort of bean or legume. These are what we consider to be complex carbs. So you notice how the starchy vegetables is in that carb category. When I say vegetables, when I'm talking to you guys and I say vegetable, I'm talking about non-starchy vegetables. So I'm not talking about corn and potatoes. I'm talking about broccoli and green beans and tomatoes. So what it limits refined grains. Of course, refined grains are things like white flour, white bread, white rice, your regular pasta, things like that. Again, this is not super specialized. All of you kind of already know this, but it is much more strict. Excessive added sugar, obvious. Sweets and treats, another obvious one. This one may not be as obvious. But if you've talked to me, it should be obvious. We do not allow, I want to rephrase that. We do not recommend any sort of sweet taste on a regular basis. So this includes any sort of sweetener. Doesn't matter if it's natural, like monk fruit, stevia, erythritol, xylitol. It does not matter. natural, artificial, anything. So no sugar substitutes, no sweeteners. Might be the top priority here. So these are just examples of sweeteners. And this is not an all-inclusive list. There are more than this. I bolded the ones that you'll see most often. So aspartame or stevia, sucralose, monk fruit, etc. So those are the most common ones you'll see, the bolded ones. Okay, fruit. This one's past year or two, this has become a very hot topic. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one. I do not want you leaving this room telling everybody that the dietitian told you that fruit is bad. I'm not saying fruit is bad for you, okay? However, fruit tastes, how does fruit taste? Sweet, exactly. Unless it's like a lemon or lime or grapefruit or something. So we are strict on fruit. So preferably fresh fruit, okay? So not like dried fruit, raisins. I know Dr. Miller hates raisins. I mean, we all, so no dried fruit, no processed fruit. I've picked on a lot of you probably for applesauce. The little plastic fruit cups, I don't love those. When you process fruit, it does lose a lot of the fiber, maybe all the fiber, and simply just becomes just a sweet, sugary part of the fruit with, not much nutritional benefit there anymore. So definitely preferably fresh. So kind of what I just said there, jellies, jams, that one's obvious, canned fruit, etc. So twice per day or less. I want to emphasize or less. So just like the speed limit, I know we all drive above the speed limit, right? So maybe that's not the best example, but you're supposed to drive that or lower, and it's okay to drive lower. Well, again, bad example. Anyway, this is 2 times per day or less. If you're only doing 1 serving of fruit a day, I'm okay with that. If you're doing 0 servings of fruit a day, I'm okay with that. There are no essential nutrients in fruit that you cannot get elsewhere. Fruit does not have to be a staple in your house. Okay. Now I know most of our kids love fruit, and it is hard to take away. And that's why y'all do 2 a day. You don't have to. Okay. I think that was kind of misconstrued over the past couple of years. You do not have to do 2 servings a day. Again, fruit is not bad. I'm not saying fruit is bad. I'm not saying fruit is evil. There are benefits to fruit, but yes, it still tastes sweet. And to our population, it does affect them differently. Again, go to Dr. Miller's talk tomorrow, but there's a hyperinsulinemic response to sweet taste. When our kids taste sweet, their insulin skyrockets, and that leads to a lot of not good things, whether it's anxiety, behaviors, whether it's weight gain. Insulin is a fat storage promoting hormone. Anyway, sweet taste, okay. Portion sizes. So portion sizes are significantly smaller than the general population. This is subjective. Of course, it's subjective. Every kid is different. Every family is different. But we do recommend significantly very, very small portions. So, for example, Carson, I'm going to use you as an example, okay? Carson, hold your hand out like this. Okay. So if Carson were to be eating blueberries, I would say 6 blueberries. I'm thinking whatever fits flat in the palm of his hand as 1 serving. So if Carson had 12 blueberries in a day, that is the amount of fruit I would want him to have for the day, maximum. So he could have less than that, and that'll be completely okay. Carson should also always eat it with protein. So if Carson did have 6 blueberries, some sort of protein with it, and this helps the insulin response. The protein and fat as well can kind of blunt that insulin response to the sweet taste of fruit. So 6 blueberries plus a cheesesteak, 6 blueberries plus a couple almonds, six blueberries plus some peanut butter or something, piece of meat, boiled egg, something. Okay, so that's fruit. You can ask questions later, but that was my summary on fruit. Fruit is not bad, but it is okay to it is okay to eat less than 2 servings of fruit a day. These are the most common things that I ask families to try to avoid, okay? You see their flavored yogurts. That one's a huge one. So many families do flavored yogurts. If you're going to do yogurt, I'll recommend plain, like the stuff that tastes like sour cream, the stuff that most people are not used to. If you don't like plain yogurt, just don't buy yogurt or buy cottage cheese or something. Bars are sweet just inherently. Something I didn't put up there that I just thought about, granola is inherently sweet. You see flavored oatmeals. You see condiments like condiments like ketchup and barbecue sauce. You see cereals. But you see here, these are the most common ones I ask families to please be careful of, okay? The number one thing here, they're all sweet. Okay, so as you've noticed, I've been saying sweet tasting. I have not been saying sugar. There's a reason why, because some things do have sugar in it that don't taste sweet. These are examples, okay? These are okay. Plain Cheerios, I put the nutrition facts on there. Yes, there is sugar in plain Cheerios. It is okay. Plain Cheerios, in my opinion, in our opinion, do not taste sweet. Tomato sauce usually will have a little bit of sugar in it. So sweet taste, do not think of it as sugar as an ingredient. Think of it as sweetness as a taste, right? So Crystal Light has no sugar, but Crystal Light is very sweet. Plain Cheerios does have sugar. Plain Cheerios doesn't taste sweet. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of emphasize that point. This is something that some families have a hard time understanding. Even refried beans can have sugar. I don't care though. Refried beans are not a sweet food. I think the point here is that some food products add a little bit of sugar to like balance the flavor of something, not necessarily to add sweetness, right? So if you ever made your own tomato sauce, you add sugar to balance like the acidity of the tomatoes. You're not adding sugar to make the tomato sauce taste sweet. Whole grains. So please try to avoid refined grains. Unfortunately, the most of the grocery store, like 80% of the grocery store, is going to be white flour when looking at grain products. But look for whole grain products, okay? You want to see 100% whole grain. That'd be ideal. And the key word there is whole, WHOLE. The second keyword is 100%. Marketing gets very, very clever. I was in the Atlanta airport, and I ordered a sandwich. They said it was on 9-grain bread. That doesn't mean anything. To say, yes, it has 9 grains, but they could be 9 refined grains. If it doesn't say whole, it might not be whole. I mean, that 9-grain bread could have been whole. I don't know. But if you see multi-grain or 9-grain or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean it's whole. Whole is the key word there. Not to get into too much like science behind this, but the whole grain actually contains the germ and the bran. If you were to look like a wheat kernel, it has 2 pieces of that kernel on there that are very, very nutritious and provide fiber and vitamins and minerals and protein. But when you refine it, when you take that whole grain and you refine it into a refined grain or white flour, you lose a lot of that nutrition. That protein and fiber that you just lost can help blunt that insulin spike that I was talking about. You essentially are digesting it slower. You get a lower blood sugar spike, a lower insulin spike when you have that protein and fiber in that whole grain versus a refined grain. So look for 100% whole grain products. Okay. So quantity. So I do want to say portion sizes are hard to talk about with individual as a whole, because every single kid is different. Every single person is different. And even that same kid might need more someday versus another day. So it is highly, highly, highly variable depending on the kid, depending on the person, depending on the situation. So what I focus on is, are they gaining weight appropriately and are they growing appropriately? So it is only a starting point. But you see there in the bottom right, that is a handout that I have, I used to give out, I don't give it out as much anymore just because it confuses some people. But essentially, if your child is growing appropriately, gaining weight appropriately, then that's good. And we can make adjustments. I can help you make adjustments if they're gaining weight too slow, gaining weight too fast, losing weight when they're not supposed to, etc. But yes, this is one thing that there's a lot of gray area when it comes to portion sizes. A lot of families ask me, how much should I give them? It's hard to say. And plus, we never ask people to measure anyway. So there you go. Most important is appropriate growth and weight gain. I will say generally, again, this is a very general statement, portions are typically smaller. Our kids typically are burning calories at a slower rate. Not always, but sometimes. There's the fruit again. Twice a day or less, served with a meal or with some sort of protein or fat. Snacks. This is actually another good hot topic that we've been talking about recently. You do not need to assume that snacks are needed. And I definitely don't recommend pre-planned or scheduled snacks. A lot of our families are scheduling snacks. The reason why I don't like this is because, again, our kids can be very rigid, can have OCD-like tendencies, and just simply tend to eat because they think it's time to eat. I don't like that. I want people to eat because you're hungry or because your body needs to eat, not because the clock is telling us to eat. That's not physiologic. That's not natural, right? I don't want my daughters to eat just because they think it's time to eat. I want them to eat. I want them to be able to tell if their body needs food or not. So trying to avoid pre-planned or scheduled snacks. So like it says there, if your child is easily distracted, like if your child asks for a snack and you say, maybe later go play, and they say, okay, they're not really hungry. They may be bored or they may be just in a routine of eating at a certain time. Of course, lighter snacks are typically preferred, right? So I would rather them eat, non-starchy vegetables as their snack. Usually, of course, you can do a more filling snack if needed. If you truly think your child is hungry, you can give them a more balanced, more filling snack. But as kind of a default, lighter snacks are the best choice. So no carb-only snacks. So even if you did choose like a whole grain cracker, that's fine, like Triscuits, but not just Triscuits. Again, this insulin response and this blood sugar response, I don't want just carbs, okay? So if you're gonna give Triscuits, give it with protein or fat. So might be Triscuits with cheese, Triscuits with peanut butter, Triscuits with deli meat, something like that. Now you could do a protein-only snack. You could do just a cheesesteak. You could do just almonds, just peanuts, just sunflower seeds or something like that. So you can do a fat-only snack, you can do a protein-only snack, but we want to balance carbs. So no, we don't want carbs only. Please try not to schedule snacks. I want to spend a little more time on this actually. This meal scheduling. How many of you have a child with Prader-Willi that's under 5? About between 6 and 10. Okay. And older than 10. Okay. So if the younger your child is, the easier it is to try to incorporate going with the flow and not being on a schedule. Now, if your child's older than 10 and they are already set in a schedule, this is challenging. This is definitely hard. So for all of you, those with younger children, please try not to get your child so kind of grooved into a schedule, into that cognitive rigidity of following time and time in a schedule. It is hard to get them out of it. So that's why I try to encourage this. As soon as I meet families, the younger the better, trying not to do this. Again, if your child's like 15 or 16 and they're already locked into a schedule, it is challenging to get them out of it. It's that rigidity that's so hard that really drives a lot of our recommendations in terms of how often, how much is that rigidity. So as we all know, life is spontaneous. We want our kids to be able to go with the flow, not be so schedule based. So the younger a child, it's usually easier, but the earlier the better. Okay, balance. So of course, protein, carbs, and so to me, there's two types of carbs: starchy sources of carbs, and then non-starchy sources of fiber, which is also a carb. So, and then fat. So in that picture there, that's like one of my meal building handouts, but essentially that's what I want a meal to look like, right? We want lots of non-starchy vegetables. That should essentially be the biggest thing on your plate. So whether it's a salad, whether it's broccoli, whether it's tomatoes, whether it's carrots, but we too often non-starchy vegetables are either forgotten completely or just an afterthought. So this is the opposite. We want it to be the biggest thing on the plate. Okay. And then you can have a nice piece of protein, whether it's chicken or fish or pork or beef or whatever. And then some carbs. I don't want you to do low carb though. A lot of families get too scared of carbs. I do not want you doing keto. I do not want you doing low carb. I don't want you doing anything like that. Carbs are not evil, but carbs, at the same time, carbs are definitely very easy to overeat. So I just try to teach my families to think about carbs as a side item. It's not nothing. It's also not the entree, right? Of course, spaghetti with garlic bread. Of course, that's way too much, right? But it doesn't have to be just like vegetables and protein. We want some carbs there. Okay. A lot of people got too scared of carbs. Carbs is a very, very, very tricky, polarizing topic. I don't want to demonize carbs. Carbs serve an essential benefit nutritionally. But we want the right type, right? So not refined carbs. Instead of white bread, get a 100% whole grain bread. Instead of white rice, brown rice. Fat. Okay, so fat, again, is not a bad thing. I do understand, I know what some of you are thinking. I do understand fat does have a lot of calories. But like I was saying before, just because something is higher calorie doesn't necessarily mean it's not good for us or something we should avoid. Fat serves an important role for us. Of course, unsaturated fat is better. So unsaturated fat typically comes from plants. So things like oils, things like olives, things like nuts and seeds, things like that. The one exception to that is fish. Fish is an unsaturated fat, which is a great fat, but of course it does come from an animal. So one thing that some of our families were doing, they were serving a little too much fat. So again, we don't concentrate, we don't focus on calories, but again, we still have to focus. We still have to respect how many calories are in things. So some of our families were serving like avocado at every single meal or cheese at every meal. I wanted to try to tell them, you don't necessarily have to intentionally add fat at meals because it's usually already there, right? If you're serving beef or if you're serving chicken or if you're cooking with oil, which most people do, there's usually fat already there. You don't have to necessarily add extra to that meal. And some of our families were doing that, and their child was gaining they're gaining weight a little bit faster, and that was the reason why. This is a relatively new handout that I made. I kind of wanted to make it in like a checklist format, but anyway, it came out to be this. But essentially, if your meal looks like number one, an unsweetened drink, number two, a good source of protein, you can see there in parentheses, it says about a third of the meal, approximately a third of the meal. Some non-starchy vegetables, I would say at least a third of the meal. And then a good higher fiber carbohydrate, like a whole grain or starchy vegetable. That's about a quarter of the meal, maybe a third of the meal. If you're doing all four of these things, you're doing a great job. This is a different way of presenting similar information, of thinking about protein, fat, and fiber. I do want to just kind of point out the middle of that diagram, the middle of that Venn diagram, are probably my favorite foods nutritionally because they have good fat, fiber, and protein. And that's the category of nuts and seeds, right? So protein, so meats, of course, have protein, but no fiber. Vegetables, of course, have fiber, but no protein. And things like oils have fat, but no protein or fiber. So nuts and seeds have all three of those things. And they're also really convenient. There's no cooking, there's no prep, there's no cleanup. They're very convenient foods, whether as a snack or part of a meal. Okay, variety. So again, variety can be hard, I know, with these kids just because of the rigidity of wanting the same things over and over again. But I highly encourage you to mix it up. And also don't treat yourself as a waitress or waiter. So I don't want you to, I know a lot of families do. I don't want you to concern yourself too much with if your child likes it or not. Just serve it. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, that's fine. But your house is not a restaurant. So don't rely too much on favorite foods. Just because your child likes this food and likes this really balanced meal, don't rely on it too heavily. Don't serve it over and over and over again. You can serve it, of course, sometimes, that's fine. But don't rely too heavily on it. And don't be afraid to serve new foods and foods that you know they may not like. So keep encouraging and keep trying other foods. Even if there's a food that you know your kid hates, keep serving it. I do the same things with my daughters. Most parents, when they hear their child does not like something, they take a mental note and they say, okay, I won't serve it anymore. To me, that's the opposite of what we should do. When I saw my daughters didn't like Brussels sprouts, I took a mental note and said, I'm going to continue serving that over and over and over again. But not in a mean way. Of course, not every day, but I would serve it, I don't know, maybe once a month or something like that. And of course, I'm not fighting about it. I'm not forcing them to eat it. I'm just exposing them to it continuously and repeatedly. So nutritional variety, of course, there's lots of benefits to it, whether it's microbiome, whether it's just making sure we're not deficient in any nutrients, whether we're encouraging or discouraging picky eating, etc. Okay, that's variety. Okay, drinks. Drinks are hard because I know many of our kids do not like water. Some do, which is great, but a lot of our kids don't like water. However, please keep serving it or offering it. I'm not afraid of dehydration, okay? And I also know constipation can be an issue with many families, but sweetened drinks are really hard to get off of. So please, please, please try your best. If your child is suffering from constipation, we can discuss, okay? But sweetened drinks is one of the most commonly talked about topics in our clinic. So there's our options, the handout there, those are other options. Please be careful of those marketing terms you might see on labels. Just because it says those things does not mean it's not sweetened. And please just, again, build plain water into the daily routine over and over and over again. We're going to drink this much water and then we'll put our shoes on. We're all going to drink this much water and then we'll have dinner. We're all going to drink this much water and then we'll go outside and play. Build it into a habit. Start early. So we don't have a time machine. So that means now, if you haven't already. So the earlier, the younger your child, the easier this is to do. Okay, this is not a meal plan. You do not have to follow this. They're simply there for ideas. But as you notice, number one, there's nothing sweet with the exception of some fruit. There's a little bit of fruit there. Every single meal has a protein. Every single lunch and dinner has a non-starchy vegetable. And every single meal has some carbs. Okay, it's not low carb, and they're higher fiber carbs too. So there's no refined grains there. But anyway, just examples of different meals you could potentially serve. I'm just flying. Sorry. Okay, convenience. Again, you do not have to be a 5-star chef. If your breakfast was peanut butter on whole grain toast, that is completely okay. If your lunch was some deli turkey, some Triscuits and carrots, that's perfectly fine. And if your dinner was just some tuna and whole grain bread and some cucumber slices, that is okay. It is okay if you don't like to cook. It is okay if you don't like being in the kitchen. You can still make a balanced meal. These are just pictures of other convenient foods. Sorry, I'm going to go back for a sec. That minute quinoa, 1 minute in the microwave, and you have your higher fiber carb. Okay. I just don't want people to stress out too much. You do not have to make homemade meals. Right, Andrew? All right, convenient snacks. Just examples, bunch of pictures if you're looking for snacks. But again, sorry, I'll go back to that. Sorry. Please do not pre-plan snacks. Do not schedule snacks. You do not necessarily need snacks. But if you do, these are just examples of types of things you could potentially serve. Now, I will say some of the starchy ones, some of the carby ones, like that Smart Food popcorn, for example, I would serve that with protein. Same thing with the hippies. The hippies are a chickpea-based puff thing. I would serve that with protein. Triscuits, I would definitely serve with protein. Anyway, just examples of kind of convenient packaged snack ideas. Okay, schedules. I kind of already went over this, but please try to avoid feeding the clock. Again, what I mean by that is a lot of families simply feed based upon the assumption that your child might be hungry. They're going to accept that food no matter what. So we just want to make sure I would not offer it unless you truly think they're hungry or unless they're asking at an appropriate time. So trying to maintain flexibility. So a lot of families give into giving a snack because they want to avoid a behavior or a tantrum or whining. Please try to avoid that. I understand that giving them a snack at that time solves a short-term problem, but leads to a longer-term problem. So I want to think of it as a bigger picture. If you avoid giving that snack, you have a small-term problem, but a longer-term solution. And what I mean by that is if you're teaching them flexibility, you're teaching them how to go with the flow by not following a specific schedule. Now, I want to go back to that, sorry, just for a sec. You will hear different schools of thought on this. You will hear and historically, schedules were the way to go. Things are changing. In my opinion, I think we should be less schedule dependent. Again, it depends on each family is different. I will say that. Do what you think is best for your family and what works best for you. I do think trying to teach the flexibility can be helpful long term, even if in the short term it might seem really stressful in that moment. But I think you're essentially helping long term, building long term flexibility. Special occasions. Okay, so birthdays, big holidays, maybe a vacation. It is okay to give some, like real cookie, real cake, real brownie. I know a lot of you feel very anxious about even thinking about doing this. It is okay, but it is limited frequency. It is a lot less often than the general population. Examples that are not special. I've heard these before. Friday nights. What does that say? Wednesdays. Okay. These are not special occasions. Okay. Weekends. Oh yeah, desserts. So after dinner is not a special occasion. Okay. Only when we go out to eat. Yeah. Okay. So no. Um, okay. Family roles. I want families to think of this as an entire team approach. Please, please don't treat your child with Prader-Willi differently than other children in your household. I would prefer that everybody eat the same meal, moms, dads, siblings, whoever. It benefits the whole family. As you've seen, this is not a unique diet. Again, it will be a little more strict. It will be more strict for the child with Prader-Willi, but we had this one family where the one of the children, the Prader-Willi child, was eating eggs and toast for breakfast, while the sibling was eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Okay, that doesn't make sense. You're going to build resentment. You're going to build. Number one, Cinnamon Toast Crunch isn't a great choice for the sibling, so we just want to try to treat this as a family, as a team. So parents, please don't cater to your children's likes and dislikes. Again, they're not customers. Please treat all your children similarly. Now, if you have a child with Prader-Willi and a child without Prader-Willi, of course, the child without Prader-Willi, of course, they will be able to, there will be more flexibility there. There will be more exceptions there, for sure. But we want it in the same ballpark. We want them to be eating similarly. So don't let your own food preferences determine what's being served. I've seen a lot of parents who are picky themselves. Pickiness is almost like genetic or contagious. So don't let your own pickiness or your own food preferences kind of determine what you're serving. So your food anxiety too. So I know most parents I talk to are also have high food anxiety because of the diagnosis. Please try not to let that spill over. I know this is really hard to do, maybe impossible, I don't know, but try your best not to have your own food anxiety spill over into your children. We have seen disordered eating in siblings. My best recommendation for this is trying to treat your child without Prader-Willi the same as you would any other child. And what I mean by that, the biggest thing I want you to avoid, I do not want one of your child without Prader-Willi to feel like they have to hide away and eat. We've seen this many, many times, and that breeds disordered eating. I don't want to see that. I hate seeing that. We've seen it before. So if you have a child who wants to hide and eat away from their sibling with Prader-Willi, that needs to be stopped. And the best way that I would recommend is that child with Prader-Willi needs to understand that their sibling might be eating things that they are not necessarily are okay for them, or at a certain time, if that makes sense. Siblings, I feel for siblings too. It is hard for families, it's hard for parents, but it is hard for siblings. Grandparents, do we have grandparents in here? Okay, a few. Please do not show love through food. You can show love through other ways, many other ways, whether it's just time or money or toys or books or whatever, but please do not show love through food. Siblings. Do we have any siblings in here? No siblings. Maybe not. There's one sibling. Couple siblings. Food security. Please try not to share your food. Please just keep an eye and understand that we're trying to keep everybody healthy and safe. Okay. Summary. Sweet tasting food. This is probably the biggest takeaway I want you to take away from today. It is not just sugar. Don't think of it as sugar as an ingredient. Think of it as sweetness, as a taste that we want to avoid. Smaller portions, especially fruit. Fruit is twice per day maximum. 0 or 1 is okay. balancing meals. So don't be afraid of carbs. We want the right types of carbs, not too much, not too little. Think of carbs as a side item. Always serve it with protein. Try to serve it with vegetables as often as you can. Variety. Please don't rely on the same foods over and over again. Don't be afraid to continue to offer non-preferred and new foods. Unsweet drinks only, please. Even if your child doesn't love it, there will be. I put Rafa to sleep. Anyway, convenience. So you do not have to, again, you do not have to be super confident in the kitchen. You can still make balanced meals without being great in the kitchen. Please try to maintain flexibility in schedules. Special occasions, please keep them very, very, very limited. Family roles, parents, you are in charge. Okay. Please don't let your child rule the roost. Okay. Before you ask questions, I have a question that I know you will ask. Okay. If my child is starting VICAT or on VICAT, does that change anything with the nutrition recommendations? The answer is no. Nothing changes. Okay. Everything I just said goes the same whether your child is on VICAT or not on VICAT. In fact, again, so nothing changes, but I do think it's actually more critical to follow these recommendations because VICAT works best. The efficacy of VICAT works best if you are not eating and drinking sweet tasting things. Okay. So it doesn't change. It's more critical. Second question that I know might be asked is that types of fruit. Okay? Are certain types of fruit, like should I do berries and avoid bananas? Should I do, lower glycemic index fruits versus other fruits? I don't really care that much as long as it's 0, 1, or 2 times a day. Fresh fruit only, extremely small portions, always with protein or fat. Okay, so yes, I do understand some fruits do taste more sweet than others, but if you're following those guidelines, you should still be okay. Okay, now questions.
All right. So someone had a question about the use of peanut butter since most brands do contain some kind of sugar. And here's Michael's response.
Yeah, I would prefer a peanut butter with no sugar added. Yes, absolutely. Now, if you get a peanut butter with some added sugar in it, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. So, I mean, I think you know what I'm saying. I would prefer one without, but if you have to buy one that has some sugar added to it, I think it's okay. Now, I will say if you have lots of money, almond butter is a lot more expensive, but nutritionally, they're very, very, very similar. Yeah.
Okay. This question was regarding constipation. And I believe one family having received a recommendation of limiting vegetables or that vegetables had some negative effects on constipation. I believe that's where this question came from. But anyway, here's Michael's response.
So yeah, constipation can be an issue for sure. Now I have not seen that, but my best recommendation for constipation is to really, really, really encourage fluid intake. So I think a lot of our kids struggle with constipation because of lack of fluids, and lack of fluids can be absolutely challenging. But encouraging the fluid intake, encouraging physical activity, encouraging that fiber, specifically soluble fiber. So soluble fiber will come in things like vegetables or things like whole grains or things like beans. That would be my best recommendation for that. But I wouldn't ask anyone necessarily to avoid vegetables for constipation.
So this last question came from a parent who was wondering about her family's consumption of beans as a staple. And here's Michael's response.
So that's completely okay. I would just be mindful in the amount of beans. To me, beans are a great carb. They're one of my favorite carbs because it's a carb, but it's a great source of protein. And there's a lot of fiber in beans. I think that's completely okay. Just trying to be mindful on the portion of beans. And I probably wouldn't serve would only serve a minimal amount of other carbohydrates with the beans, if that makes sense. Trying to not have any other carbs or minimal carbs in addition to the beans. But yeah, we have vegan and vegetarian families, and we work with them to try to figure out the best way to balance meals. But I don't see that as being a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of PWS United. If you want to learn more about Prader-Willi syndrome and how PWSA USA is making strides in advocacy, family support, and research, visit www.pwsausa.org. And while you're there, we encourage you to sign up for our Pulse email newsletter to stay informed about the latest news, resources, and events. Don't forget to subscribe to the PWS United podcast so you never miss an episode. Our team is always available to support families and their loved ones living with PWS 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call us at 941-312-0400 or email info@pwsausa.org. Catch a new episode next Tuesday, and until then, have a great week.